The movie begins in the city of Niagara Falls, where crime runs rampant. Robberies, shootouts, drug trafficking. It's a paradise for the worst of the worst. The police lack the means to stop the situation, and criminals overwhelmingly outmatch them. That hell is home to John Dromore, a Gulf War veteran turned detective who is fully devoted to his work. Together with his partner Brim, he keeps watch on a trafficker's house until the suspect comes out to greet someone. Immediately, John tries to block his path with his car, and although the criminal manages to slip away, he doesn't get far. Case solved, or so we thought. After taking down the criminal, our protagonist tries to keep his partner stable. Unfortunately, his partner dies in his arms. With 30 days off due to both his physical and emotional wounds, John heads to a bar to drown his sorrows in alcohol. It's there that he meets Tina Meyer, a beautiful woman also trying to forget her past. It turns out her husband died of cancer a few years ago, and since then, she has had to deal with her young daughter entirely on her own. Tina quickly takes notice of John and even calls him by name without his having to introduce himself. After all, the headlines about his exploits speak for themselves. Luckily so, because he's not much of a talker, he's more of a listener, and that's exactly what Tina was looking for. Before saying goodbye, John reveals that he's a widower too, so they'll understand each other down the line. Later, during a 4th of July celebration, Tina's 12-year-old daughter, Bethy, watches her mother dance with her current boyfriend, Casey. He may be far from a father figure, but at least her mother looks happy with him. When Tina finally notices her daughter, she sees that Bethy is on the house's roof and orders her to come down immediately. Sensing Bethy's annoyance, Tina lowers her tone and suggests walking home. Even though Casey suggests they stay, Tina wants a mother-daughter moment. On the way, her mother tells her that her father used to take her around these parts. Rather than cheer her up, the girl grows frustrated that she can't remember her dad. She was too young when she lost him. Trying to cheer her up, her mother takes her for a walk in the woods, just like she used to do with her father. Everything is going fine until 4 drunken men show up and recognize Tina as the former cheerleader from their high school. All 4 were obsessed with her. Mother and daughter try to run, but the men intercept them. They drag them to an abandoned cabin. Even though Bethy manages to hide in a corner, Tina isn't so lucky and is left at the mercy of the men, who abuse her without any pity. From her hiding place, the girl witnesses the entire scene, unable to do anything. After the attackers leave, a devastated Bethy comes to her mother's aid. Tina is barely responsive, having suffered irreversible harm. While searching for help, Bethy crosses paths with John, who looks on in horror at what they did to Tina. Before the ambulance takes Tina away, the detective promises Bethy that her mother will receive justice. Once the girl is stable in the hospital, the protagonist visits her to ask about her mother's attackers. Although her grandmother Agnes doesn't want her to relive the tragedy, Bethy gives her testimony, hoping the police will do their job. Fortunately, John and his colleagues quickly apprehend the suspects, one by one. Bethy then identifies the 4 perpetrators, Fred's, Jimmy, and the brothers Marvin and Lloyd. They were the ones who assaulted Tina. The next day, Casey shows up at the hospital with flowers and apologies. However, Agnes sends him packing for not having taken care of Tina when she needed him most. Not far away, John finds poor Bethy crying alone, so he sits beside her and shows that she can trust him. Meanwhile, Irma and Walt, the parents of the 2 brothers involved in the assault, go to the town's priest, a man of dubious morals, who in turn knows a lawyer of equally questionable ethics, J. Kirkpatrick. He's a sort of Saul Goodman type. For those who don't get the reference, it means he's an attorney capable of getting his clients out of the worst scrapes. The lawyer explains that there are grounds to have them acquitted. Of course, Kirkpatrick's services are very expensive, so Irma offers him her own house as payment. Walt initially refuses, but the lawyer convinces him with the excuse that he will keep their sons out of prison, where they would be abused just like that poor woman. When Tina wakes up, the first thing she says to her daughter is to get off the roof, revealing that she still doesn't remember what happened to her. Once discharged, Agnes decides to take her to their old home to care for her. The next day, they see shocking news in the paper. Tina's attackers have been released on bail. That same night, Tina relives her trauma in a nightmare and fears they will do it again now that they're free. Bethy also suffers in her own way, dealing with harassment from Layla, Marvin, and Lloyd's younger sister. With her mother, her daughter, and the support of her lawyer Dixon, Tina prepares to appear in court, where she will once again see those who violated her, all in the name of justice. When the time comes, Tina is received with contempt by Irma, who accuses her of lying about her sons. The defendants certainly don't help themselves. They all stare lustfully at Tina, and Jimmy even sings her name mockingly. Lawyer Kirkpatrick arrives a few minutes late, claiming he had to attend to a federal matter. The judge ignores his tardiness and opens the trial. Dixon states that the defendants followed Tina into the woods with the clear intention of abusing her. They would have done the same to Bethy if she hadn't managed to hide. At this point, Detective John is called as a witness, confirming that he received an emergency call coming from the woods. That's when he found Bethy. When it's her turn to testify, Tina can barely utter a word. The presence of her attackers disturbs her greatly. Kirkpatrick then has the audacity to declare that his clients indeed had relations with Tina, with her consent. Continuing his argument, the lawyer claims that the victim came from a party, intoxicated, and when she met the defendants, she offered them her body in exchange for money. At the end of the act, Tina allegedly raised her price abruptly, and since they refused to pay more, she attacked them violently. In other words, the men supposedly acted in self-defense. Furthermore, they claim they had no idea there was a 12-year-old girl present. Of course, it's a vile lie, but Kirkpatrick explains it with such skill that even the spectators believe him and end up applauding. Tina loses her composure, how could she not, and asks the judge how he can allow this. Unfortunately, her complaints are dismissed, and the guards remove her for presumed emotional instability. Having seen all this, John realizes that a different kind of justice is needed, the old-school kind. Back home, Tina pretends to be asleep so she can slip out and visits a bar, where she soon has another episode. Things get worse when a man tries to help her. Fed up with everything, the woman goes to Niagara Falls, ready to jump. Not today. The detective reminds her that she has a daughter to take care of, and her daughter has already lost her father. She cannot lose her mother as well. Still blinded by pain, Tina cries that they have already killed her. All that's missing is the final blow. After taking her home, John gives Bethy his card, telling her to call him if anything bad happens, or is about to. A while later, the girl hears a car outside her house. When she opens the door, she sees it's Jimmy, who has just killed her cat. Terrified, the girl buries the animal in her yard just before her grandmother arrives, not wanting to worry her any further. That night, Casey heads to a bar where he comes face to face with an unwelcome sight. Jimmy. Feeling invincible thanks to the trial's outcome, the thug threatens to do the same thing to Casey that he did to Tina. It would have come to blows if not for the bar owner, who quickly kicks Jimmy out. By sheer coincidence, John is in the same place, but it's no coincidence. He's on a mission. As soon as Casey leaves the bar, he's attacked by Jimmy, a mistake that will prove very costly. Justice is served. When giving his statement about the incident, Casey claims self-defense and says he had no idea that man was Jimmy. It was dark after all. Although investigators doubt him, they can't do anything for lack of evidence. Thanks to Dixon's persistence, the judge agrees to reopen Tina's case. Tired of diplomacy, Kirkpatrick proposes a deal to his opponent. If the charges are reduced, his clients will go to prison for at least 3 years. Naturally, 3 years is far too little for what they did, but Kirkpatrick reminds Dixon that winning the trial will be impossible. "We'll see," she replies. That same night, brothers Marvin and Lloyd head to a certain location, expecting to receive false evidence against Tina from Kirkpatrick's contact. That's how they end up at the edge of Niagara Falls, where John is waiting for them instead. Following the sudden disappearance of the brothers, the media begins to assume they fled out of fear of the trial. Amid all this, Irma and Layla tell the press it's Tina's fault, while Walt is more worried about keeping his house. These news reports only boost Tina's spirits to the point that Agnes and Bethy can leave her home alone, confident she won't harm herself. During an afternoon shopping trip, Bethy is ambushed by the only attacker left, Fritz, who warns her to declare that he was never part of the assault on her mother. The girl returns home terrified, unable to talk about what happened. Meanwhile, Fritz receives a call from an alleged informant with information about Tina. The thug goes to the indicated motel where, instead of meeting that informant, he finds John waiting for him at gunpoint. The detective makes him write his own goodbye letter. You know, for what's coming next. Now that Tina's abusers rest in hell, she feels much safer and even plans to move somewhere else with her little girl. A change of scenery will do them good. As for John, he confronts Kirkpatrick for defending only the worst kinds of criminals. Trash, in general. In his own defense, the lawyer reminds him that the Constitution states all citizens have the right to an attorney. That law covers even vigilantes who take justice into their own hands. Thus, John might need his services someday. Far from being intimidated, the detective mentions that he hopes he'll never need them. Before leaving Niagara Falls, Tina and Bethy stop by to say goodbye to John, especially Bethy, who thanks him for everything he has done for them. In response, the detective confesses that, if he ever has a daughter, he hopes she grows up just like Bethy. With that, John continues his work, not without reflecting on why he does what he does.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.